More than 4 out of 5 teachers across England believe that a new system of Ofsted inspections should be introduced. That's according to a teachers' union survey.
90% of teachers say they don't believe single-word judgments are a fair reflection of a school's performance, and 62% said the inspections caused them mental ill health. So, is it time for an overhaul? Well, joining us now is the former head of Ofsted, Sir Michael Wilshaw, who thinks it needs a radical reform, and also chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, Chris McGovern, who believes that Ofsted is working. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being here to discuss this morning. So, Michael, let's start with you then. Presumably you agree with the fact that we need to assess schools in some form. What do you think needs to change about how we do it?
Ofsted has been a powerful force for raising school standards over the last 30 years. I mean, I'm old enough to remember how low standards were in the 70s and 80s and much of the 90s. And Ofsted has been part of the reason why standards are so much better now in English schools. And all you have to do is look at the PISA results to see how well England is doing compared to the other home nations. So Ofsted has an important part to play. It should be reformed, though. If it's going to continue, if we're going to have another 30 years of Ofsted, it needs to change, it needs to improve, and it needs to reform. The NEU have always complained about Ofsted, always complained about accountability. The thing that really should worry Ofsted and the senior managers and certainly the chief inspector at Ofsted is that the head teacher associations, not the NEU, but the head teacher associations, the National Association of Head Teachers and the secondary head teachers, both believe that Ofsted needs radical reform. Both have said that they are losing confidence in the inspectorate. That's the real worry for Ofsted. If head teachers are saying this, then Ofsted needs to look at the way it inspects and look to see how it can improve.
So it seems to me that all that could be summarised in these one-word summaries that Ofsted gives to schools. I mean, you're saying basically that Ofsted used to be outstanding, which is the top grade that they give, but now, going down 2 on the list, it requires improvement. Let's talk about these one-word summaries now to Chris McGovern. Chris, outstanding, good, requires improvement, inadequate. It doesn't really work, does it? Because if we think about schools, they're like human beings. They're complex personalities. We all know that. You go to a different school, there's a different vibe, there's a different personality. And you can't sum up a human being, and you can't sum up a school in one word. It's just not possible.
No, and the Campaign for Real Education has been saying that for some time. That doesn't mean to say Ofsted is therefore failing. We can change the wording of some of the reports. Certainly, one word may need to be amplified. I think what we have to remember most of all is that Ofsted's there for the children, not for the head teachers, not for the teachers, for the children. And we have to put those children first. Now, I think if Michael Wilshaw, who I respected as a very good chief inspector, if he reads his own reports, he will see that he was himself writing how Ofsted has driven, accountability has driven improvement. And, you know, teachers are interesting in this matter because, of course, they're going to want a slightly easier time of things. But if you look at the websites of schools and you look at school signboards outside the front door, they're constantly quoting from Ofsted to say how good they're doing. If Ofsted has a fault, it is that they're not rigorous enough. Ofsted is, and Michael Wilshaw himself was classifying 90% of schools as outstanding. They're not actually. And although we've had an enormous tragedy within the profession recently, that shouldn't deflect us from the idea that we do need to raise standards. I think Michael's slightly complacent when he talks about what he calls PISA tests. Well, viewers may not know what they are. They're international tests, but don't do as well now as we did in the year 2000, actually. But look, Ofsted's there. It's there for the children. And don't forget that Ofsted is actually teachers. It's teachers who are Ofsted. The Ofsted inspectors should not be demonised. They are teachers and head teachers as well. Well,
yeah, you talk about a drive to improvement. I mean, you mentioned a tragedy in the same answer, and we're talking, obviously, about a drive to suicide here. The head teacher, Ruth Perry, who's no longer with us, she took her own life because she was in absolute despair because her school went down from outstanding in the previous Ofsted report to the bottom rating, inadequate. And her inquest reported that she felt powerless in the face of this one-word summary, which I accept you say we do need to look at that. So Ofsted can be a force for tragedy, just as it can be for improvement.
Well, hard cases make bad laws. It was an utter tragedy and an enormous tragedy what happened to Ruth Perry. But we shouldn't forget it's about putting children first, safeguarding children, raising standards for children. I actually believe most parents do want Ofsted.
So, Michael,
the days of the one-word judgment are going. It won't go under this administration, but it certainly will go if Labour become the next government. The Shadow Secretary of State for Education has already said, and I believe that she's right on that one. I think what you've just said is correct, that schools are complex institutions, and to inspect properly and adequately and in a detail where you need to have a judgment which is more nuanced than can be contained within one or two words. So it's going to come. So I think we'll see a different form of inspection in a few years' time, and we'll see the one-word judgment or two-word judgment going to be replaced by a report card which will be a lot more detail and reflect more fairly on the strengths and weaknesses of a school.
Chris McGovern, coming back to you, I mean, you were saying earlier that, you know, that teachers wanted an easier time over this and we shouldn't change things just because of, you know, that we have had this tragedy, because of this one tragedy. But we know that these inspections put an awful lot of mental stress and strain on teachers. You know, there's a significant number of them. 62% say it causes them mental ill health. Surely there's a better way of doing it than actually affecting people's mental health when we're looking at these systems. You know, we haven't seen significant change over a number of years, and there must be a better way of doing it now that doesn't impact on people like this.
Well, the better way, according to the teaching profession, is self-assessment. The Post Office did the self-assessment, didn't really work very well. No, there isn't a better way. It's not a great way, Ofsted inspections. It is very stressful. I've been an inspector and I've been at the receiving end of inspection. It is a stressful time. Teachers do need to be given lots of support, and sometimes Ofsted get it wrong. But it may not be the perfect system of assessment, but it's better than the alternative, which is the Post Office alternative of self-assessment. You cannot rely on teachers assessing themselves. You have to have some external supervision of that. So the teachers will push for much more self-assessment.
So, Michael, what do you make of that? Is there a way of making this process less stressful then, or do we just have to accept, OK, it's the only way that we can adequately assess what's going on?
I was a head teacher for 30 years in London before I went to Ofsted as its chief inspector. I knew my school very well. I knew it was a good school. I knew it was an outstanding school in many ways. The stress comes when head teachers believe that the judgments are all over the place and that they're not going to receive the correct judgment. Too many head teachers that I speak to and talk about Ofsted, when I talk to them about Ofsted, will say, the trouble is, Michael, that too many judgments are insecure, too inconsistent, and made by people who don't really know schools very well. Inspectors who lead the inspection teams have not been head teachers themselves in too many instances. So Ofsted needs to look at that and reform before there's a complete concern or waste of time from head teachers.
But he's got a very strong point. We can't have teachers marking their own homework, can we?
No, we can't have that. I'm not arguing for Ofsted to be replaced. What I am arguing for is Ofsted to change and to move away from the one and two word judgments and to look very carefully at the type of inspections that they're being followed.
All right.
OK,
thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
The bell has gone for break, I'm afraid.
A spokesperson for Ofsted who have said we inspect schools on behalf of children and their parents, but we are mindful of the pressures on school staff. We've already made several changes to inspections over the last year, focused on school leaders and staff welfare, but we've promised to go further to strengthen confidence in our work. And actually one of those changes is that schools that are rated inadequate then have the chance to be revisited and see if they've made the changes, which actually
basically
hopefully eases some
an
of the
appeal
pressure.
process is what it
But no doubt more needs to be done.
All right. Thank you both very much indeed.